When I first moved in, I wanted to make my ranch truly mine. The old wooden posts lining the property were falling apart, so I replaced the fence. But I didn't go for the usual simple barbed wire or bland wooden panels. I wanted something bold, something that reflected my personality. I chose a custom design. Steel rails painted in a deep forest green with ornate patterns at the top. At the main entrance, I installed 2 tall gates with gold detailing and carved horse motifs. It was a mix of rustic charm and elegance, and I thought it gave the ranch real character. Within a week of finishing, the letters started arriving. They weren't from the county or zoning officials. They were from the HOA of the subdivision nearby. The first one was polite enough. Dear landowner, your fence does not meet the community's standards for visual appeal. We request that you remove or alter it immediately to match the approved aesthetic of the neighborhood. I laughed when I read it. I didn't even live in their neighborhood. My property was completely outside their jurisdiction. I tossed the letter into the fireplace. But the HOA didn't stop. Over the next month, I received 6 more letters. Each one grew more aggressive in tone, threatening legal action and fines. I called the number listed on the letter and got connected to their president, a woman named Karen Miller. She had the stereotypical HOA personality, sharp, bossy, and convinced she held power over everyone within a 5-mile radius. Mr. Harris, she said over the phone, her tone dripping with arrogance, your fence is an eyesore. It devalues our homes. Either you remove it or we'll block access to your property. That got my attention. Excuse me? You don't have authority over my land. I'm not in your HOA. You use our road, she snapped. And as long as you do, you follow our rules. Now, technically, she was right about one thing. To reach my ranch, I had to drive down a single paved road that wound through their subdivision. It was the only road that connected to the main highway. But her assumption that it gave them control over me was her first mistake. A week later, when I tried to drive home with my truck, I found a barricade across the road. Bright orange cones, metal gates, and even a hired security guard stood in place. A bold sign read, Private HOA Road. Trespassers will be prosecuted. The guard waved me down. Sir, this road is closed until further notice. Residents only. I live past here, I said firmly, pointing toward my ranch. Not our problem, he replied. HOA orders. I had to take the long way back, parking on the side of the highway and hiking nearly a mile through rough fields just to get home. I was furious. That night, I sat at my desk with property maps spread out before me. If the HOA wanted to play dirty, I'd outplay them. I started digging into land records at the county clerk's office. After hours of research, I discovered something shocking. The road they claimed as their private road wasn't actually owned by the HOA at all. It was still registered under the original developer who had built the subdivision decades ago. And guess what? The developer had put the road up for tax auction because of unpaid property taxes. The auction was scheduled for the following week. My pulse quickened as I realized the opportunity. I contacted a lawyer friend, and together we set the paperwork in motion. On the day of the auction, I walked into that courthouse and placed my bid. The HOA president and a couple of her board members were there, too, smug and confident, clearly intending to secure the road for themselves. But when the gavel fell, it was my name, not theirs, that was declared as the new owner. I had bought their only road. The look on Karen's face when she realized what had happened was priceless. Her jaw dropped, her eyes went wide, and for once, she was speechless. I didn't even acknowledge her. I just shook hands with the county official and left with the deed in my pocket. The next morning, I wasted no time. I drove my truck to the entrance of the subdivision and put up my own sign. Private road, property of Harris Ranch. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Then I installed a heavy steel gate with a keypad entry system. Only those with my permission could pass. The HOA residents were furious. Dozens of them gathered at the gate, shouting and demanding entry. Cars honked, people screamed, and phones were whipped out to call the sheriff. But when deputies arrived and saw my deed, they confirmed I had every legal right to control access. Karen stormed up to me, her face red with rage. You can't do this. You're trapping us in our own homes. I crossed my arms. Funny, that's exactly what you tried to do to me. The difference is I actually own the road. You don't. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Oh, I don't think so," I replied with a grin. For the next week, chaos reigned in the subdivision. Residents had to beg me for codes to get in and out. Some tried to sneak around the gate by cutting through the woods, but I had already installed fences and cameras. Delivery trucks refused to enter without clearance. Even school buses couldn't get through without my authorization. I didn't abuse my power, though. I wasn't cruel. I gave codes to most of the residents who approached me respectfully. But Karen and her closest allies on the HOA board? They got nothing. If they wanted out, they had to park on the highway and walk. The once pristine neighborhood was suddenly a mess of abandoned cars at the roadside. The HOA tried to sue me, of course. They claimed I was holding them hostage and violating community access rights. But the judge threw their case out in minutes. The road was legally mine, bought fair and square at a public auction. Their failure to pay taxes was their own undoing. Eventually, the subdivision held an emergency meeting. Dozens of residents demanded Karen resign as HOA president. She had stirred up this war, and now everyone was suffering because of her arrogance. Under pressure, she stepped down, her pride shattered. After that, things calmed down. The new HOA leadership approached me respectfully, asking for a compromise. I agreed to lease them access to the road for a fair price, money that went straight into maintaining both the road and my ranch. In the end, I profited. My land remained untouched, and my fence stayed exactly the way I built it. And every time I drove past that golden gate at the entrance to my ranch, I smiled. Because sometimes when people push too far, the best revenge is owning the ground they stand on literally. When I bought my ranch, I thought I was finally escaping the constant noise of city life. For 30 years, I had worked construction, built homes for other people, and saved every penny I could. Owning a wide stretch of land was my retirement dream. I didn't want neighbors peeking over fences, didn't want HOA committees telling me what shade of beige I could paint my garage. I just wanted peace. The ranch I bought stretched across several hundred acres, with a thick forest line to the north, a stream running across the south, and a long road leading back to the main highway. The only catch was that the road ran directly through a subdivision that had popped up years after the ranch was first established. That subdivision was controlled by the dreaded Homeowners Association. At first, I thought nothing of it. I wasn't in their neighborhood. My property wasn't under their covenant. Surely, they wouldn't bother me. I was wrong. The fence that started it all, the first project I tackled after moving in, was replacing the old, rotten fence around my land. I wanted something that made a statement. Instead of the usual barbed wire or plain wooden posts, I hired a welder friend to help me design a steel fence with intricate patterns, woven rails with horse and bull silhouettes, painted in deep maroon with gold trim. At the main entrance, I built 2 tall iron gates with a bronze ranch logo right in the center. It wasn't gaudy to me, it was art. To celebrate finishing, I invited some old friends over for a barbecue. We sat on the porch, steaks sizzling, music playing softly, and admired the fence glistening in the late afternoon sun. "Looks like something out of a Western palace," one buddy joked. I was proud. But 2 days later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. It was a formal notice from the Oak Hills HOA. "Your newly installed fence does not meet the approved standards for community appearance. You are hereby required to remove it or face fines and enforcement actions." I laughed. Enforcement actions? On me? I'm not even in their community. I called the number listed on the letter. A sharp, curt voice answered. "This is Karen Miller, HOA president. How may I help you?" "Yeah, this is John Harris from Harris Ranch. I just got a letter from you about my fence. You've made a mistake. My property isn't under your HOA." "No mistake," she said coldly. "Your fence borders the entrance of our subdivision. It lowers the value of our homes. As long as you use our road, you abide by our rules." I tried reasoning with her, but it was useless. Karen spoke like a queen addressing a peasant. By the time I hung up, my blood was boiling. Escalation, the letters kept coming, each one more threatening than the last. They demanded I tear down the fence and replace it with a neutral, HOA-approved barrier. They threatened to block my road access if I refused. At first, I ignored them, but a week later, I discovered they weren't bluffing. Coming home from the feed store, I found a barricade across the subdivision's entrance. Cones, chains, and 2 hired guards stood blocking the road. A big wooden sign read, "Road closed. Non-resident access prohibited." I rolled down my window. "That's my road you're blocking. Move it." One guard shook his head. "Orders from the HOA. You'll have to park outside." I was forced to leave my truck by the highway and hike a mile through rough brush just to reach my ranch. Furious, I drove straight to the county office the next day to check land records. That's when I learned something that made me grin. A discovery: the subdivision had been built 25 years ago by a developer who had since moved out of state. While the HOA controlled the homes and lots, the road itself was still legally owned by the original developer. Even better, the county had recently put the road up for tax auction due to years of unpaid property taxes. The auction was only a week away. I couldn't believe my luck. With my lawyer friend's help, I filed the necessary paperwork. On the day of the auction, I showed up early. To my surprise, Karen and a couple of her board members were there too, clearly intending to buy the road for the HOA. She smirked when she saw me, whispering something to the others. They thought I was wasting my time. But when the bidding started, I played it cool. The HOA raised their paddle confidently, thinking no one would outbid them. But I had deeper pockets and more determination. Each time they raised the price, I went higher, calm, steady, unshaken. Finally, when the gavel fell, the auctioneer declared, "Sold to Mr. John Harris." The look on Karen's face was worth every penny. Her jaw dropped. Her smug smile vanished. For the first time since I met her, she looked powerless. Turning the tables, the very next morning, I drove to the subdivision with my newly signed deed. At the entrance, I removed their barricade and replaced it with my own heavy-duty steel gate. A sign read, "Private road, property of Harris Ranch. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Within an hour, chaos erupted. Cars lined up, honking, residents yelling, some demanding to know why they couldn't get out. Karen stormed up, furious. "You can't do this," she shouted. "You're trapping us." "No," I said calmly. "I'm doing exactly what you tried to do to me. The difference is I actually own this road now. You don't. You'll be sued into bankruptcy," she spat. I held up the deed. "Good luck with that." When the sheriff arrived, Karen thought she'd be saved. But after reviewing the deed, the deputy shrugged. "He owns the road. Nothing we can do." Karen screamed so loud that people from several houses came outside. But the law was clear. The road was mine. Life behind the gate. Over the next few days, the subdivision descended into chaos. Residents had to come to me directly to request access codes. Most were polite and reasonable, and I gave them entry without trouble. But Karen and her closest allies? They got nothing. If they wanted to leave, they had to park by the highway and walk. Delivery trucks refused to enter without clearance. Garbage pickup halted. Even school buses couldn't get through unless I personally approved it. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't trying to make enemies with the whole neighborhood. But I wanted Karen and her board to feel exactly what they had tried to make me feel: powerless. The residents quickly turned on her. HOA meetings became shouting matches. Parents demanded answers about their kids missing school buses. Elderly folks complained about groceries being carried half a mile. People were sick of Karen's arrogance. The HOA crumbles within 3 weeks. The subdivision held an emergency vote. Karen was forced to resign as president. Her allies on the board were removed too. A new leadership group approached me, this time with respect. "Mr. Harris," one of them said, "we apologize for how you've been treated. We'd like to negotiate a road access agreement." I leaned back in my chair, pretending to think. "A lease, perhaps. Annual fee. Covers maintenance. And you leave me and my ranch alone. Permanently." They agreed instantly. Papers were signed, money exchanged hands, and just like that, I not only secured peace for my ranch, but also turned a profit from the very people who tried to control me. The final word as for Karen, she moved away within months. Rumor has it she couldn't stand facing the neighbors who blamed her for the disaster. I didn't shed a tear. Now, whenever I drive through that golden gate of mine, past the road I own, and up to my bold, maroon and gold fence, I smile. The HOA tried to bully me. They tried to trap me. But in the end, I didn't just keep my fence. I bought the ground out from under them. Because sometimes, the best revenge is written on a deed. When I bought my ranch, I thought I was done with rules. My whole life, I'd been told what I could and couldn't do. Growing up, my parents were strict. In the military, regulations dictated every detail. Later, when I lived in the suburbs, the HOA told me how tall my grass could be, what color my shutters had to be, and even threatened me when I parked my RV in my own driveway. I swore the next house I bought would be free from all that nonsense. That's why, when I found a 200-acre ranch on the outskirts of town, I signed the deal faster than you could say freedom. The land had hills, a creek, and enough space that I wouldn't see another soul unless I wanted to. My only connection to civilization was a long road that cut through a nearby subdivision. At the time, I figured it was no big deal. How wrong I was. The fence that sparked a war. The ranch came with a sagging barbed wire fence that looked like it hadn't been touched since the 1970s. I wanted something different. I'd worked construction most of my life, and I wanted to build something bold, something that would make the ranch truly mine. I designed a fence with black iron rails, stone pillars, and copper detailing. The gates were tall and majestic, carved with horse silhouettes. It was part Western, part luxury. My friends said it looked like the entrance to a national park lodge. I loved it. My dogs loved it. Even the mailman said it was the nicest entrance he'd seen. But apparently, the HOA didn't. 3 days after I finished, a certified letter arrived. Dear ranch owner, your recently constructed fence does not comply with the Oak Haven HOA standards for community appearance. Immediate removal or modification is required. I chuckled and tossed the letter in the trash. I wasn't in their HOA. Surely, it was a mistake. Then came another. And another. Each one more aggressive than the last. Finally, the HOA president herself, Karen Whitfield, called me. Meeting Karen, Mr. Taylor, she said in a clipped, smug tone, "Your fence is a violation." I nearly laughed into the phone. Violation of what? I don't live in your neighborhood. You use our road, she snapped. And our road belongs to the HOA. As long as you drive through Oak Haven, you follow our rules. Her arrogance was stunning. Lady, I own a ranch. Not a condo. My fence is my business. You'll regret this, she said before slamming the phone down. The roadblock, I didn't think much of it, until the day I tried to drive home and found a wall of orange cones, barricades, and even a chain across the road. A uniformed security guard waved me down. Road closed, he barked. I leaned out my truck window. I live past here. Not anymore. HOA says no access until further notice. I couldn't believe it. I had to park my truck on the highway and hike a mile through brush just to reach my own house. That night, sitting at my kitchen table, staring at county maps I'd printed, my anger turned into determination. If the HOA thought they could bully me, they had no idea who they were dealing with. A hidden opportunity at the county clerk's office, I dug into property records. That's when I discovered a golden nugget of information. The subdivision had been built 20 years ago by a developer who still technically owned the main road. The HOA maintained it but had never actually transferred the deed. Even better, there were thousands in unpaid property taxes on that road. It was headed for auction. I nearly laughed out loud in the clerk's office. The HOA had no legal claim to the road they lorded over. And soon it would be up for grabs. The auction on auction day, the room was packed with bidders for various properties. Karen and 2 HOA board members were there, smug as ever, whispering and smiling like they already owned the place. When the road came up for bid, Karen confidently raised her paddle. The board nodded in approval. Then I raised mine. Her head whipped around so fast I thought her neck might snap. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. I just smiled. Bidding. The price climbed higher. Karen raised her paddle again and again, each time looking more flustered as I calmly matched every bid. Finally, when the gavel came down, the auctioneer announced, "Sold. To Mr. Taylor." The color drained from Karen's face. My new gate. The very next morning, I installed a massive steel gate at the subdivision entrance. A bold sign read, "Private road, property of Taylor Ranch. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Within an hour, the place was in chaos. Residents honked horns, shouting from their car windows. Kids missed school. Delivery trucks turned around. Even the mail carrier had to beg for entry. Karen stormed down the street, screaming at me, "You can't do this. You're holding us hostage." "No," I said calmly, holding up my deed. "I'm holding my road. You blocked me first. I'm just returning the favor." When the sheriff arrived, he sided with me. The law was clear. The road was mine. Chaos in Oak Haven over the next week. The once pristine subdivision turned into a mess. The cars piled up on the highway shoulder. Families had to hike groceries half a mile. Trash collection stopped. Delivery companies refused service. I wasn't cruel, though. Residents who politely came to me got access codes. I wasn't out to punish everyone, just the people who tried to punish me. And that meant Karen. She and her board members got nothing. They had to drag their shopping bags through ditches while the rest of the neighborhood laughed behind their backs. The collapse of the HOA soon. The residents turned on Karen. Emergency meetings were called. Parents shouted about their kids missing school. Elderly neighbors cursed at her in public. The HOA was crumbling under the pressure. Finally, in a dramatic evening vote, Karen was forced to resign. Her board allies followed her out the door. The new leadership came to me humbled. "Mr. Taylor," one said, "we're sorry for how you were treated. We'd like to negotiate." I leaned back in my chair. "Here's the deal. You lease the road from me. You pay for access. And you leave me and my fence alone forever." They agreed on the spot. The sweetest revenge now. Every time I drive through that iron gate and past my copper-detailed fence, I smile. Not only did I keep my fence, but I also turned the HOA's arrogance into a steady income stream. As for Karen, she moved away, humiliated. Last I heard, she tried to join another HOA in a different town, but the story of her downfall had already spread. Nobody wanted her in charge again. In the end, I didn't just win. I bought the very road they used to control me, and I closed it on them. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't shouting or fighting. It's signing your name on a deed and letting the paper do the talking. When I left the city, I thought I had escaped all the nonsense that came with it, traffic, noise, and most of all, the constant interference of homeowners associations. For years, I'd been told what I could plant in my yard, what shade of paint I could use on my house, and even how long I could leave my truck parked in the driveway. Every month, the HOA seemed to find something new to complain about. So when I found a 150-acre ranch on the edge of town, I didn't hesitate. It was everything I wanted: rolling pastures, thick trees for privacy, a creek that wound along the southern edge, and a long driveway that led out to the main road. The only downside was that this driveway passed through a subdivision built years ago. Still, I figured I'd never bother with those folks, and they'd never bother with me. I was wrong. Building the fence, the first thing I wanted to do on my ranch was fix the fence. The old wooden posts were rotting, sagging like tired bones. I wanted something bold, something that stood out, something that screamed, "This land is mine." I hired a welder friend, and together we designed a fence with wrought iron rails, brick columns, and bronze details. At the main entrance, I built tall gates with intricate horse carvings and an arch with my ranch's name, Silver Creek Ranch. At night, lights illuminated the entrance, casting golden shadows across the gravel road. It wasn't gaudy to me. It was art, it was pride, it was freedom. But within a week, letters began to appear in my mailbox. The HOA strikes. The first one was almost polite. "Dear property owner, the fence you've erected does not comply with Oakwood HOA design standards. Please remove or replace it immediately." I laughed. "I'm not in your HOA," I muttered, tossing the letter aside. The second letter was sharper. The third was downright hostile. By the fourth, I got a call from Margaret Thompson, the HOA president, though the whole neighborhood called her Karen behind her back. "Mr. Dawson," she snapped, "your fence is unacceptable. It's tacky, it's overbearing, and it lowers the value of our homes. Either take it down, or we will block your access." I chuckled. "Lady, you don't have a say in what I do with my ranch." "As long as you use our road, we do," she said smugly before hanging up. I shook my head, not believing for a second she could follow through. The roadblock. A week later, I came back from town with a load of feed in my truck, only to find the subdivision entrance blocked by concrete barriers and hired guards. A bold sign hung across the barricade: "Private HOA Road. Non-residents prohibited." I leaned out my window. "Move the barrier. I live past here." One guard crossed his arms. "Not anymore. HOA says no access." I had no choice but to leave my truck on the shoulder of the highway and carry sacks of feed on my back across a mile of uneven ground just to get to my house. My dogs barked in confusion as I stumbled through the fields, cursing under my breath. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at county maps and land records. If they thought they could push me off my own land, they had another thing coming. The hidden loophole. The next morning, I visited the county clerk's office. I spent hours flipping through dusty files until I found something that made my jaw drop. The HOA didn't own the road. They maintained it, sure, but it was still legally owned by the original developer. And here was the kicker. The road had years of unpaid taxes. It was scheduled for auction in 2 weeks. I nearly laughed out loud. Auction day. On the day of the auction, I arrived early. To no surprise, Margaret and 2 board members were there, sitting tall and smug. They thought they'd win the road easily. When the bidding started, Margaret raised her paddle with confidence. The board clapped her on the back like it was already theirs. Then I raised mine. She froze, eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "Bidding," I replied coolly. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the room as the price climbed higher. Each time Margaret raised her paddle, I raised mine right after. Her smugness turned to panic, then to anger. Finally, when the gavel came down, the auctioneer announced, "Sold to Mr. Dawson." The room went silent. Margaret's face turned beet red. Taking control the very next morning, I rolled up to the subdivision with heavy equipment. The concrete barricades the HOA had put up? Gone. In their place, I installed a massive steel gate with electronic access. A new sign read, "Private road, property of Silver Creek Ranch. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Within an hour, chaos broke out. Dozens of cars lined up, residents honking horns and shouting. Kids missed school. Delivery trucks turned around. Even the garbage trucks refused to enter. Margaret marched down the road, her face twisted with rage. "You can't do this. You're holding us hostage." I waved the deed in her face. "Actually, I can. This is my road now. You blocked me first. I'm just returning the favor." When the sheriff arrived, the residents cheered, until he looked at the deed. Then he shrugged. "Sorry, folks. He owns it. Nothing we can do." Margaret nearly fainted on the spot. Life behind the gate the following weeks were chaos. The cars piled up on the highway shoulder. Parents had to walk their kids through ditches to get to school buses. Grocery deliveries stopped. I wasn't cruel, though. Most residents came to me politely, and I gave them access codes without a problem. But Margaret and her board? Not a chance. They were forced to walk every single time. The subdivision that once boasted about its luxury and order now looked like a disaster zone. And the residents knew exactly who to blame. The HOA falls apart. Emergency meetings were held. Voices were raised. Fingers were pointed. Parents demanded Margaret step down. Elderly neighbors cursed her name in public. Finally, the residents voted her out. She left in disgrace, her power shattered. The new HOA leadership came to me with humility. "Mr. Dawson," one said, "we're sorry for what happened. Can we work out a deal?" I smiled. "Lease the road for me. Pay me an annual fee for access. And leave me and my ranch alone." They agreed immediately. The final word now. Every time I drive past my bronze-detailed gate and along the road I own, I smile. Not only did I keep my fence, but I turned the HOA's arrogance into a steady stream of income. As for Margaret, she moved out within months. Last I heard, she tried to bully people in another HOA, but word of her downfall followed her. Nobody wanted her in charge again. In the end, I didn't just win. I bought the very road they thought gave them power over me, and I closed it on them. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. It's written in ink, stamped, and signed on a deed.